The Menscape
The
Podcast.
Menscape Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
So hello and good evening and welcome to the May edition of the Menscape Podcast, sponsored by Healing Hearts Parental Alienation Coaching, which is not by accident because today is World Parental Alienation Day or something like that. And my guest that's kindly agreed to join us is Mandy Kelly. How are you doing, Mandy?
Hey, good evening, Carl. Many thanks for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast. I'm good.
Yeah. So without much ado, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
So I am a mother of two sons, and unfortunately, my two children are not with me at present. 2 years ago, my estranged husband and my two sons and I went on what was supposed to be a regular family holiday to Egypt, to where he is from and where his family live. And unfortunately, at the end of the trip, he decided not to return to Ireland, but worse still was the fact that he took custody of my two children and refused to allow me to see my children. And even worse still was I was kept and locked in an apartment there and had to make the very, very difficult decision in having to return to Ireland on my own. So since
Blimey.
March, right up until now, I have been fighting for the return of my two children to Ireland.
Yeah.
And it makes my case quite not different, because all of any case regarding parental abduction or parental alienation, they're all horrific. But what makes my case rather harrowing is the fact that my ex-partner has a cash demand on my two children. So I have been lobbying relentlessly to have the government say that my kids are technically hostages. Like, if you
Right.
look up the definition of hostage, a hostage is someone that's been kept, against their free will for the exchange of, and most often it's usually money. So my kids are technically hostages. So I think it would be very important, Carl, that we remember both that we remember my two sons on World Parental Alienation Day, and we remember all the parents, mothers, fathers, and children that are victims of this horrific crime and ordeal.
So I've had some experience and we've even done some coaching based off the back of my own experience, healing from narcissistic abuse, overcoming narcissistic abuse, and sadly going through and experiencing parental alienation. But this seems like another ball game again. This is not parental alienation. It's more of an extreme form. You use the words parental abduction there, but
Yes.
this is actually like something out of an episode of fucking Starsky and Hutch or something.
No, it is. It's
Like
a
the bad
kidnapping
guy
case.
stroking the cat
Yes.
in the
Yeah, it is a
James Bond
kidnapping
movies.
case. And what's really frustrating in cases, similar to my own, parents that are victims of this crime, they almost have to go to extreme lengths to have the authorities deal with the case as a criminal matter rather than a civil matter. Like the advice that I received from the Department of Foreign Affairs here in Ireland was to just go to Egypt, get a divorce, hope for the best, hope for the best that I would, even if I got custody, that he would hand over my children, even though they know that there is a huge cash demand on my kids, and that I would be put in a situation, me, the mother of my two innocent children, I would have to be put in a situation that I would have to live in Egypt until my children are adults. And as in, due to the circumstances surrounding my case, this is completely and utterly unviable. It doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't work in the best interests of my children, and it wouldn't work in the best interests of me either, for me having to do something like this.
So your experience thus far, has it led you to sort of like The Hague and the international courts and Interpol and stuff like that?
So when I came back, Carl, obviously I made a statement to the local Garda station,
Yeah.
and obviously they were very as in they've never dealt with a case like this, and it was all very new to them, and they weren't really able to give me much advice. The only real advice the only really support that I got that helped me in any way at the beginning, because all I was met with was closed doors. Just go to your embassy in Ireland. I couldn't even go to the central authority here in Ireland because they deal with countries that are actually signatory to the Hague. So because Egypt isn't, I
Right.
was advised to just deal with the Irish embassy here, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Irish consulate in Cairo. And they were horrendous to deal with. Sorry, but they were just
They're
absolutely horrendous.
sorry, we're not
given a list.
subscribed.
Yeah, I was given a list of Egyptian lawyers and told pick one and hope for the best. As in, that is not adequate at all. There was no welfare checks done on my children. My children's passports were never requested to be returned or cancelled. Sorry, but this is against my children's fundamental human rights, especially due to the criminal aspect of my case. So the first organisation that really helped me was Reunite International in the UK. And they're an amazing organisation that helps parents that go through both parental alienation and parental abduction. The lady who found this organisation and charity actually went through a horrific case of her own in having her daughter returned to her many, many years ago. And she receives a lot of support, financial support from the British government. So she is obviously she's a qualified mediator, and she has years of experience dealing with cases from all over the globe. And she even deals with cases that, say, for example, of a couple that may have just recently separated or divorced. And she helps with mediation between mom and dad in relation to, access to children. So it's not just only parental abduction cases, as in she deals with cases in both, as I said, both in the UK and globally.
So is there any hope of being able to get your children back on Irish soil? And can you go through the existing political channels that are there, or do they have to treat you as a special case?
Well, Carl, if I don't have hope, I have nothing. So every day I get up, I have to have hope, even on really bad days. And as in, I think parents that go through parental alienation, or in my case, a parental abduction, you do have good days and then you have really bad days.
Yeah.
And even the really bad days, I've always clung on. I have always been able to cling on to hope. Even, for example, today, I learned today that the Egyptian and the Irish government met this week, and the two sides can sit and delegate 6 months after my case occurred, they could delegate on an international agreement on the return of Egyptian artifacts. They met this week regarding humanitarian aid. So I really cannot get it around my head that they cannot sit and talk and come up with an agreement on child abduction and child custody cases, as in a bilateral agreement or even a memorandum of understanding. So not only am I battling my ex-partner, I'm actually battling with authorities both here in Ireland and in Egypt, which makes my case even more horrendous and more difficult to navigate around. I have utilised both civil proceedings here in Ireland, and I have proceeded with criminal proceedings in Ireland, as in there's domestic arrest warrants and European arrest warrants for my ex-partner. And hopefully in this instance, Interpol can hopefully be notified about my children not being back in their homeland. And I do hope that because I have utilised every diplomatic card that there is, as in my case has been raised here in Ireland, both at in the Dáil, the Seanad and Oireachtas committee meetings, that I have made enough noise in the media and meeting the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Justice, that hopefully, because I have exhausted every option, and I think that they know that I am not going to be pushed away. And I think this is the case with a lot of parents, even parents that are going through parental alienation and going through lawyers and solicitors and barristers, that there does come points that you do, not as a parent, but I mean that you feel that the authorities are pushing you back from getting the support for both your children and for yourself, but you just have to keep fighting. You just have to keep fighting. Like your child, in my case, I know my children need to be back in Ireland. They need to be back with their mother. They need to be going to school. They need to be having a good life here in Ireland. So I have no other choice but to fight I will fight to my very last breath to ensure that my children get justice and that I get justice.
Right. So there's a question that occurred to me as you were saying that. I was only in Egypt last November on a tour around the ancient sacred sites and the temples and a Nile cruise and stuff. And it struck me that whilst they might not be signed up to the international sort of convention with The Hague, surely Egyptian people, leaders in Egypt, would be horrified and ashamed at the conduct of your ex-partner and the father of your children, and they would want to be seen to be cooperating with the relevant authorities to ensure that it's treated as a criminal case, and your man's sort of imprisoned there for, or whatever the typical punishment might be, for a ransom demand and kidnapping of your children? Or is it simply that they default to the side of your man because he's Egyptian? Is there any kind of desire on behalf of the Egyptian authorities to cooperate? And would they not want to be seen to be respectable and respectful in this case?
Well, first of all, Carl, I think it's very important, and I hope to your listeners that they understand that my case is not in anything in relation to religious or cultural differences. I've worked in the United Arab Emirates for 8 years, and I have nothing but good memories of working with people from all over the globe, but specifically people from North African Arab countries. And I will definitely say that anybody from that part of the world that I have discussed my case with have been absolutely horrified about the nature of the case and are incredibly sympathetic. I think the only door, like as in the Egyptians have kept, the Egyptian authorities have kept the door open for me here in Ireland, in that I can visit the Egyptian embassy, and they have been sympathetic. And I feel that because, and I was actually advised by an Egyptian judge from the Ministry of Justice in Egypt that if I went to the bother of making enough noise in the media by my case, that both sides would have no other option but to intervene and do what was best for my two children. And unfortunately as well, Carl, too often, I'm not talking about my case, but in the case of fathers who do this in Egypt, unfortunately, not with the Egyptian government, but sometimes with Egyptian families, sometimes dad is looked upon as the hero, especially if dad is married to a foreign mother. And they often use the excuse that the foreign mother, who may not be Muslim, may not be able to raise the child or children in the most appropriate Islamic way. But in my case, that is not anyway relevant, because how can they argue that my children could be raised as good Muslims when their father has requested a cash demand? That's totally against any religion.
You would expect so, yeah.
Yes, it is. And I know for a fact, Carl, as I said, when you're put in this situation, I think you either you sink or you swim, and I think I have swam, and I'm keeping I continue to swim, and I continue to get my story out there. And I have, as a friend of mine stated, she's a barrister, and she said, Mandy, you always make one good move and you get 10 knocks back, but I have a good reset button, and I will keep using that reset button until my children are in my arms.
Yeah, I think whatever the outcome, regardless of the outcome, I'd say the boys, when they're older, will be very proud of you and your endeavors to see that justice is done. And on behalf of parents all over the world who, through no faults of their own, are removed from the lives of their children, you can't think of anything more horrific.
There is nothing actually more horrific.
Yeah, you have a child, you hold them in your arms, you kiss them on their head, you take a bullet for your kids, like you do anything.
Of course, exactly. Like they're part of your soul, and even, you know, like as in, obviously, for any parent that loses a child, it is definitely the worst thing that could ever happen you. But you know, you grieve. But when you're a parent that is alienated from your child, there's a sense of embarrassment or shame to it, that people don't actually know how to speak with you or confront you with it. Like as in, when this first occurred to me, I was actually embarrassed to actually, you know, nearly go anywhere, because I was afraid of people asking me where my children were. I was embarrassed to tell them that I had to leave Egypt without my children. There obviously are some very narrow-minded people out there that keep saying to me, why are you not going there to get your children? So it's only when you're put in that situation that you really realize what people that go through this are experiencing. Even I have the height of sympathy. I have nearly more sympathy for people that are actually living in Ireland, for fathers and mothers that are actually living in Ireland and that are alienated from their child, because you can be you may live very close to your child, but you don't have access to your child. That can even be worse.
So there's a couple of things I want to come back on what you've said there. One is this idea that to survive going through it, you somehow have to learn not to take it personally.
Yes.
Because it's not about you as a mother in fact, you were just the perfect victim for the person that decided to try and remove you from the lives of your children. Now, they could have, a mental illness or mental health issues or disordered parenting, or even be on a borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder spectrum. But the bottom line is they don't care. They don't give a
They
shit.
don't
They don't
care.
give a shit about you, and they don't give a shit about your kids.
No, they
Right?
don't care. And obviously,
And that's what you're dealing with.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to elaborate further, but like as in, and I hope I will be able to tell my story in more detail, but like I have received confirmation that he has never even applied for custody for my children over like in Egypt. He's got someone else to do it on his behalf and family member, which is even more horrific. So he's basically telling the authorities and the Egyptian courts that I don't want to look after my children, but I'm happy for them to be kept captive until mommy comes and hands over a brown envelope, which is horrific.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to come back on as well was the support that I'd received personally from a guy in the UK called Charlie McCready.
Yes.
Shout out to Charlie if you're watching.
No, I will. And please God,
And
very
raising
soon,
awareness around this. Yeah.
when my children are back with me in my arms, obviously as their mother, I'm going to utilize all the strength that I've been able to build up. Hopefully, please God, that I'm physically and mentally fit to do this. But the strength and resilience that I have developed through going through all of this, that I will be able to get my children the support and help that they need. And more than likely, Carl, they will be probably in therapy until they're adults and maybe even further on in their life. But I'll make sure that my children are going to be okay. I will do that to the best of my ability as a mother.
So this is one of the things that Charlie got me to see, really, was that the children are the victims in all
They
of
are the
this.
victims.
It's obviously hugely upsetting and disturbing as a parent going through it. But the children, if you think about it, they could have difficulty forming relationships, healthy relationships. They could have difficulties with addictions,
anger issues,
and feeling, because
unwanted.
it's not fair on them that they've had a loving parent removed from their lives.
Exactly.
But it can be through some very subtle procedures. In your case, it's not very subtle. It's literally the children were stolen and removed. But the idea that something in your makeup would make you the perfect victim of this, Charlie got me to see that it was actually nothing I'd done. It was just the fact that I was a nice guy, or that I was easygoing.
And it takes a long time, Carl,
Right.
as in when this first happened, I had months of ruminating what I had done wrong. I had done nothing
You didn't
wrong.
do anything wrong. You were
Yes,
just a
I was
perfect victim.
completely and utterly emotionally manipulated. And my poor children, being used as pawns. And going back to what you were saying, Carl, about, these people have mental illness such as borderline personality disorder, or, NPD. But abuse is abuse is abuse.
There's no blood or bruises or bones broken, but the
It's actually
psychological
worse.
abuse is.
Yeah, this is abuse that takes years to heal from. And I even know, even when my children are reunited with me, I know probably I will have to go through the emotions. Obviously, I'm going to be ecstatic by the fact that my children are with me and I'm finally able to close this horrific chapter. But I know that I will have to again commence the healing, because obviously by being with my children and seeing them, it will actually make me reflect more on what I've missed. Like, my youngest son was 16 months when this happened, him in my arms, and my other son was 3. Like, at the moment, I'm trying to find a school place for my child that he can go to school in September. He is supposed to already have 2 years done at school. My other son's supposed to have 1 year done in childcare in prep. Like I said,
What are your children's names, Mandy?
Zane is my oldest son's name, and Karim is my youngest son's name. Like, this is
Zane he's about 5 years old now, is it?
Yeah, Zane is 5. Zane will be 6 this coming May. Kareem is 3. He will be 4 in November. Thankfully, they're still young. They're very young. And like, as in, we all know that children can be incredibly resilient. And I have no doubt in my mind that when they come back, that if they get the support and care that they need, and obviously a lot of loving, that their healing will also be able to take place, and that they will be able to live, normal. They will, please God, be able to live the best normal childhood that I can give them.
I've got news for you. There's no such thing as normal.
Well, there isn't any such thing as normal. There isn't. No, you're right, because it doesn't matter what way we bring up our children, they're going to be some way traumatized.
And that's something else that I've been learning about through the various channels, where there seems to be more and more information out there now about narcissistic personalities, about narcissistic abuse, how to spot it, how to overcome it, and how to handle or treat or deal with someone who, from the outside looking in, looks like they care because they're great pretenders and manipulators, but at the heart level or at the empathy level, there's something terrible happened to them, whereby to survive in the world, they developed a defense mechanism that frankly just enables them to exploit people and not care about people, especially their own children. And what I learned as well was that, when you mentioned about the shame of trying to explain it to somebody like it was your fault, when I spoke to my partner's, like, by default become an expert on this by now herself, and she was saying to her auntie, who's a nun, about what happened, and the default response was, but there's no smoke without fire. Your man must have done something. If the kids don't want to talk to him, they don't understand that the psychological abuse or manipulation or the way that the children have been played in that way. And so from the outside looking in, it can almost be a very lonely place.
It can be a lonely place.
Because people don't understand it, but there's much more awareness now. There's more podcasts and videos and blogs. There's a girl called the Anti-Alienation Project that I've been watching on YouTube, the Teal Swan podcast that one of my clients sent me. And it's amazing now, because all of this would have been happening all along. It's just that nobody ever knew what to call it.
Well, the first time I ever heard about narcissism, and I think that a lot of people will agree with me, that it was just around COVID time that social media started to explode on coaches actually using their knowledge and actually putting their knowledge to use on social media platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And this is how young people and our generation are starting to learn about this. And going back to what you said, yes, I totally agree, Carl. There's a lot of people that don't know about this, but there's a lot of people that don't want to know about this.
And why is that?
Because then they're going to have to admit that they can observe this in their family circle or friend circle or in their patterns of friendships or relationships. The healing takes courage, it takes time. And we've had this conversation many times before, Carl, and I agree with this, that there is always going to be someone in the family that has to sort out shit.
Right. So this is where a lot of the work I've been doing, helping people with a bit of coaching through experiencing parental alienation, is the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, and the emphasis on the multi-generational trauma, and the fact that in the family system, you can recognize certain patterns, obviously, on the maternal and the paternal side. And usually there's issues around alcoholism, abandonment, and shame. And again, it's partly these issues that make you the perfect victim for the narcissist looking to exploit you. And, it's unfathomable to think when you get together with someone that they're going to try and steal your children from you.
And I know for a fact, Carl, from being trapped in the apartment with him,
yeah,
that he had this planned. He had this all premeditated for a long time. We're not talking 6 months. We're talking maybe to this extent of 2 years plus.
and that plan was hatched
Yeah.
here in
And he had
Ireland.
assistance. Yeah, he had assistance both here in Ireland and in Egypt. And going back to, what you're talking about with narcissistic partners and family members, education is key. It really is key. When this first occurred to me, I obviously, because I had very little support to lean on, I decided to try and educate myself as much as I could on narcissism.
Right. Yes.
And through educating myself, I decided to actually commence a course on becoming a specialized coach on narcissism. And this is only the beginning. This is only the start. And I think that through dealing with people and talking to people that have overcome this abuse, not only in their childhood and in their adult life through relationships with partners and friends, that you get a better sense of the true horrific effects of this horrific ordeal.
And you're still going through it, I take it, obviously,
Yes,
until you have your
exactly.
children back.
Yes, exactly. And you deal with it in your work life. And I think another big thing, and I think you would agree with me, Carl, that once you get educated, your circle of people becomes a lot smaller and you become more vigilant, hyper vigilant with people, and you can spot the signs a mile away.
It's almost like there's an arrested development. It's almost like somebody developed as far as early childhood, late childhood, early teenagehood, and then something stopped. So you've either got men or women going around as adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s and stuff, but they've got the mental age of a child. They don't care about anything outside of themselves, and all other people are there for is to help them get what they want.
Yes.
It's almost like an arrested development, like a child.
It's a toddler. It's a toddler. Exactly. It's just an adult behaving like a toddler. That's what a narcissist is. And the big defining thing for me with a narcissist as well is the compulsive lying. If you have a partner or a family member or a friend who's constantly lying,
this is how to spot it.
Yes. And as I said, going back to observing that you become more vigilant with people, you start actually questioning a lot of things, not only about your childhood, but your friendships, but you even start questioning the system and people that are working in the system and how certain individuals are selected because of their personality types and traits. So narcissism is not just something that happen, like as in that we see behind closed doors. It's all around us, unfortunately.
Not anymore. It's very much out there to be
Yes,
seen
exactly.
what it is.
Yes.
And it's almost like if you had some kind of an issue in your own childhood that you were honest enough to tell your partner about, that's like
They will
ammunition.
utilize it against.
They'll load it up into
Yes,
something.
yes, they definitely will.
So aside from the compulsive lies and manipulation and deception, they also exhibit a great deal of charm and are able
So
to
chauvinistic.
make friends and get people to feel sorry for them. And so it can be very difficult for family members to spot, because usually they'll just think someone's a great guy or a great girl and not realize that they're just expendable tools there to be utilized when they're on side. And once they figure out that's what that person is, they'll be discarded without a thought. And there's even terms like the whole vocabulary I was learning about this, like flying monkeys and adultification, and these terms. It's almost like it's always been there. We just didn't know what it was called.
Exactly, sure. It has only really been recognized as a medical condition. It was labeled as a medical diagnosis since,
I think it's
it's only
polite
since
to
the
call it a medical
1980s.
condition, isn't it?
Yes, 1980s, and it's on the DSM framework, and you have to, like, for a person to be diagnosed, they have to have 5 out of the 9 traits. So if someone has 4, does that not make them a narcissist? Or if, say, for example, they have more than 9, what are they going to be labeled at? So we have to be very careful with how we label this. And I think at the end of the day, as I said before, abuse is abuse is abuse. And if someone is too good to be true, that's when the red flags come up.
Yeah, I guess I remember reading something shortly after my father had died, and I'd gone through the marriage separation, and I was living on my own, and I was going through a very, very difficult time in my personal life. And I read this kind of thing, and I identified that I had about 6 out of the 12 classic symptoms of being a narcissist. And I contacted a psychic medium lady who I'd befriended. And I said to her, I'm worried that I might be a narcissist.
Sorry, Carl, can I just butt in before you finish? And I'm really sorry, but we must remember a narcissist will never, ever, 98% of the time, ever think that they are the problem. So for victims, and this happens a lot, I've learned this through my education, that a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse, they think that they're the problem.
Right.
And another thing is that because you spend so much time with these people, you actually develop some of their traits. But obviously, when you separate and when you go through the healing process, you realize that it's your empathy for these people and how they suck you in that makes you feel that you are the problem.
And that's the other term, gaslighting.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to the whole vocabulary. And this has been a huge education, to be sort of convinced into believing that you're the problem and you're the narcissist.
Because they constantly criticize you. It doesn't matter whether it's your appearance, whether it's your parenting skills, whether it's your ability to be a good partner. They criticize absolutely every single thing, and they chip away so much that you lose your self-identity. And that's what they want to achieve, because at the end of the day, they are jealous of the empathy that their victim has. They're jealous of the positive traits such as kindness, generosity, and all the amazing, beautiful traits that their partner has that they will never ever have.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's so, for someone that has no knowledge or education about this, it takes a long time to get this around, like to get educated and to think that someone can be that sad and sick. Well, and even to the sick, to be to the point of that sad and sick that they actually want their partner to do something absolutely horrific to themselves, to actually nearly physically hurt themselves
It's all
because
about winning. It's winning
they
and
want to
losing.
win, and they hate and are so jealous of their partner.
And so this, yeah, I think calling it a medical condition is quite kind.
It is quite kind, and it's something that
Yeah.
we need to be very careful of, because obviously it's people then start to maybe use the word depression, which I think is absolutely inhumane. Inhumane. Depressed people are not narcissistic people. Most often, depressed people are victims of NPD.
And that's the reason why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see where certain patterns of behavior occur. Look, I guess I'm fortunate in that I've been able to get really good support at the right time to help me transmute and alchemize my own pain and suffering into being able to use my experience to then be of service to others and help them with what they're going through. But someone like me, I'd still be kind of no good to you because you need international diplomatic kind of connections. You need someone to go into Egypt, say to your man, you're out of order, you're going to jail. I'm taking these boys on a plane and bringing them back to Ireland. So unless you're in the CIA or something, how are you going to do that?
But as I said, we can talk about that for hours, Carl, because obviously there's many different cards that I'm using, and hopefully one card will flip and will work to ensure my children and I get justice. But going back, like as in you were saying that people that go through this, they need help, and sometimes therapy works for people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Somatic therapy.
Healing modalities.
Exactly. Yeah. Reiki, reflexology. There are so many different healing therapies out there. But at the end of the day, it's on us to heal. And, your therapist or your healer can't be with you 24/7. So you do have to develop your own coping mechanisms. And unfortunately, we can try and utilize healthy ones. And obviously, there's unhealthy ones, but it's
That's my
ensuring
one.
that.
You see that?
Yes, and this is my one.
Peppermint chocolate.
Don't worry, it's only a soft drink. There's nothing stronger inside it. But I mean, like I said, we all have to use what makes us be able to cope properly.
So I saw in my own personal journey where I had to let go of drinking, smoking, gambling, watching porn, and other lower vibrational activities that would keep
Yeah.
me trapped in being a lesser version of myself and remove myself from the people around me that kind of enabled that. And so the healing journey and the healing process has allowed me to let go of those things and look, sure, how bad is it if I have a nibble on a bit of, peppermint chocolate every now and again compared to all the things I used to do? It's hugely empowering to be able to see where the journey has taken us in terms of our own personal development and personal evolution.
I totally agree, because
It's hard to always keep sight of that, though. It's easy to lose sight of that
it
when you're
is very
experiencing
easy
the
to lose
pain
sight,
of losing your
especially
children.
when you're having a really bad, shitty day, when things might not be going well, and you think, oh, like as in you think, my life's a mess, etc., etc. But I look at my own self in the last 2 years. Professionally, I've progressed. I've progressed so much in that. I'm much more aware of people. I've had to learn an awful lot of hard lessons about people. I have a much smaller support system, like support group of friends. And obviously there'll be friends probably for the rest of my life. But another important thing that I've really, really learned, and this was something that I was always quite good at. I would have always been an introvert. But I think for someone that goes through such abuse, that it can be very difficult to learn to be on your own. And I'm not only saying about living on your own or being on your own, but actually being happy and having thoughts that are peaceful and that are not scaring you or freaking you out, and actually just being content. Being content, there's no money in the world that can buy contentment. Like, obviously, my life is not easy at the moment. It's far from easy. Like, as in, I can't actually plan anything with the way my life is at the moment. But I get up every morning, and even today, I was complaining to you before we started the podcast of something that I had to endure this afternoon. But I have hope, I have contentment, because nobody is annoying me. My ex-partner, I know, will never be able to annoy me again. So there's great comfort in that. And I know there will be better days. I know that. And that's what I really want parents that go through this to always have that inside them, that there's always hope, and to always fight for your own contentment and peace. Because once you have that, everything else is easy. Seriously, everything else is easy. Like, even at the moment, and because I'm going through a legal process overseas, and here, obviously, I have stresses about finances and stresses about,
Right.
taking time off work. But I know that if I keep my mind in a really strong, keep positive and keep hopeful, and as you said, keeping my mind in a really strong high frequency, I know that I will attract the things into my life that will make all of this much easier.
The only crime that you've committed is meeting, maybe even falling in love with someone that saw your pure love for your own children as a weapon that they could beat you over the head with, or something that they could exploit.
100%. That was the only
What the
thing,
fuck is
Carl.
that like?
Yeah, like,
you
as in that.
you don't think that's ever going to be a thing, right?
And thankfully, I think about my 2 children every day, but I've closed the chapter on that part of my life. People say, oh, you should go to therapy and talk about all of this. Everybody has their own way of dealing with things. And my way of dealing with him is just closing the chapter. I will never look back. That's my way of coping. I will never look back. Obviously, I will never make the same mistake again in falling for a man who has his traits. And I will educate myself in order to heal and to never ever allow anyone to disrespect myself, to disrespect me in that way, or my children. But even to learn, like, as in learning more ways to actually develop more self-respect for myself,
Right.
to never, ever, ever allow someone to cross my boundaries. Like, as in, you can be kind, like, there's no problem with people being kind, but there has to be limits. And unfortunately, he abused my limits. He completely walked over my limits. And as I said to, like, I think it's very important for your listeners to know as well, that if my ex-partner had have come to me and asked for a divorce, obviously I would have been quite upset. But, if he wanted to go back, if he had told me that he wanted to go back to Egypt to live, that wouldn't have been an issue. Obviously, everybody has their own free will. So that would not have been an issue. And I would have ensured that he would have been okay financially to be able to, start up again. But for him to do what he did to his kids, there's no forgiveness. And I know people say that you need to forgive in order to heal, but I can't forgive.
Yeah, it's a process.
I can't forgive. It's not that I can't forgive him for what he has done to me. I can't forgive him for what he has done to his children.
And that's something karmically, I suppose, that he'll have to deal with.
Exactly. And I don't even think of that, Carol. All I want and all I live for is for my children to be back safe in Ireland, and for me, please God, to use my healing and what I've learned in the last 2 years to be able to help other parents, both mothers and fathers, that have to experience this horrific ordeal.
Yeah, thankfully there are a lot of cases whereby the children get a bit older, they maybe have children themselves, and they start to look at things with a different pair of eyes, and they start to figure things out for themselves, and they start asking questions, and they realize that things didn't quite add up in the narrative that they were told by the alienating, manipulative parent
Yeah.
to start to remove them from their alienated parent. But aside from going any further into that, what I want to do is just shift slightly into some questions that, like a quick fire round for you.
No
Right?
problem.
Have you ever jumped out of a plane?
No, but actually, 2 days ago, I actually saw an ad on Facebook. They are doing a charity skydive.
Wait, are you going to do it?
Maybe ask me next year. I have to go through, I have to get my children back, and then we might do the skydive for Reunite and for charities that help parents in this situation.
Have you ever ridden a horse?
Yes, I have when I was younger. Yes.
Driven a Ferrari?
Not yet.
Have you ever been abducted by aliens?
I haven't been abducted by aliens, but I've been abducted by even worse. My ex is playing partner.
Have you ever walked on hot coals?
No.
What is your favorite smell?
Oh, definitely. Chanel No. 5 or any of the Dubai shopping malls. They smell absolutely amazing. They burn oud and they burn oils. I go to any mall in the Emirates and they smell absolutely fantastic.
Okay, so have you ever written a book, is something I ask all my guests.
I'm in the process of it, Carl, and
Yeah.
many thanks to my amazing writer.
Apparently there's a guy out there called the Right Coach.
Yes, the right coach
Yeah.
who is assisting me, and I hope and pray that we might have it published by the beginning of 2026. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But the journey of it is actually quite interesting because it's made me reflect on my past
Yes.
and made me actually see points in my life where I could have made better decisions.
And this is the whole concept of writing to heal, write to heal, healing through writing.
And hopefully by the reader might get some inspiration and observe some of the patterns that they can see that I've been through, that they might see, okay, this might be something, I can see similarities here and I need to be careful.
When I wrote my first book, which I published in 2016, The Fox and the Scorpion Meets Cold Turkey, I used all of the book launches as opportunities to promote local mental health services. I had some fantastic guest speakers that just happened to be available. And because I was promoting the local Buddhist center I was a Sangha member of in Clare, and because I was promoting taking up mindfulness and meditation practice to help overcome addictions, depression, lack of self-love, and what have you, the philosophy was, if this book helps one single other person
That's
from throwing
exactly my
themselves off a
philosophy as
bridge,
well.
it
If
will
they
have been
help, it helps
worthwhile.
one person, or for the fact that it's for my kids. It's just for them, and obviously they're going to grow up and get married someday. They're going to have children, and obviously maybe someday my grandchild or my great-grandchild might start asking questions. How did this happen, or why is this like this? So they have a book to refer to.
So that leads us nicely into, have you any favorite books yourself, or any books that have changed your life, or books that you would recommend, and why?
I do dip it in and out of Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a really good book.
Atomic Habits.
Yes. So in the book it just talks about trying to make better improvements in your life and how you go about it. So it gives you really good tips on forming good habits and makes it possible and doable. And I read an awful lot of self-help books, but that book does stand out for the fact that, as I said, you can dip in and out of.
Yeah, a few of the podcast guests have mentioned the 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Stephen
People by
Coveney, yeah,
Stephen Covey.
yeah,
And Jerry Brown, that was on with us last month, mentioned The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And there are thankfully a plethora of self-help books out there, but you still have to want to have that desire to improve your situation or improve your mental health, or say, right, I need to do something here. Because you mentioned it before about happiness. If you're looking outside of yourself for happiness,
you'll never
you're
find
looking
it.
in the wrong place. Happiness is an inside job.
Yeah,
And so if we can find the tools, whether it's a book or otherwise, to help us evolve into a better version of ourselves, and not better than him or her, just better than I was last week or last month.
100%. And the healing
Yeah,
process, it's not linear. Like as in,
correct.
I know some days just even, getting up and, doing the normal things that everybody does and going to work. If I get through my day, even in a really, really horrible day that I'm grieving my children, it's a success. So like I said, we all have to-do lists, and the to-do list, sometimes it never ends. But I think even on bad days, it can be a really good and clever thing to actually just sit down and actually think of all the things that you did do, and there is a sense of achievement in doing that.
And gratitude meditations,
Yeah,
find things to be
exactly.
grateful
Even the
for.
worst day, even the
Yeah.
fact that, I still have my physical health and mental health, that's huge. Because if I don't have either of them, I can't fight for my children. So yeah, like what you said, it's being grateful for the small things. Well, for the big things, but sometimes the big things that we don't really take into consideration.
Or as one of my clients, Kimberly, said, sometimes the little things are actually the big things.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So any favorite movies or favorite songs in addition to favorite books?
Um, No, I'm a bit of a Netflix fan, and as I said, I've been just diving into kind of self-help YouTube videos. Um, I have an app on my phone that allows me to read all these different types of self-help books. Yeah, music is a good one as well. Obviously 90s music. Um, Anything that kind of increases the endorphins and puts me in a good mood. Another thing that I think that I got trapped in, and I think sometimes people that go through their healing journey get trapped in, sometimes you can read too much or like you can dive in too deep, and you can become very frustrated by what you're supposed to do and what you're doing. But I think you have to find what works for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources and tools out
Yeah,
there. Um, yeah, I certainly found, in addition to Charlie McCready, there was the likes of Caroline Strawson.
yeah.
There was a lady, Lisa Romano, was a New York-based psychotherapist that I was reading about. Codependent No More. I think Melody
Caroline
Beattie.
Strawson is a very good lady
Yeah.
to use as research on narcissism. But likewise, you just have to, you don't have to go in too deep at the beginning because you're not fit. You have to take it slow. You can't get overwhelmed by all of this because it makes you actually feel very angry when you start learning about it and what you ignored and what you could have done and what the red flags that you did miss.
So, what would have been your favorite trip abroad? Any any
Well, obviously, I
holiday?
lived in the United Arab Emirates for 8 years, so I still have a love for the place.
Was that
I
like a
lived,
long holiday?
it was,
Or were you working?
yeah, I was working, unfortunately, unfortunately, but
What were you
um,
doing out there?
I worked as an English teacher, and I've great memories of the place, as in
Yeah.
I got to meet some wonderful people. Obviously, I met my estranged husband whilst living there, but I got to visit some amazing countries, and definitely the one holiday that brings great memories is I visited Zanzibar. It's an amazing place. If there was any,
Zanzibar.
yeah, Zanzibar, it was absolutely gorgeous, like as in paradise is the best way to describe it.
Cool.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing.
So, I think we've covered a good bit there. Have you ever eaten an insect?
No,
Have you?
no, I haven't been that adventurous.
And have you ever done any public speaking?
Yes, actually, a year after this horrific occurrence, my boss asked me to create a website at work, and I submitted it for to be considered for a conference in one of the universities here in Ireland, and it was picked. So I had to speak in front of 150 people, but thankfully I had completed a public speaking course with the Irish Times college. They do professional courses, and it really helped my confidence. And obviously before I did the presentation, I was incredibly nervous, but it was one of the best things I did, because even it has helped me be able to obviously speak to you without stuttering or being tongue-tied. So through this even as well, Carl, I have become more confident because I've had no other choice. Obviously, as we said before, that when it comes to your kids, you will throw yourself and do whatever you have to do.
Yeah, but I would say that you come over as quite an articulate lady anyway. So even if you weren't speaking about narcissism and parental abduction, if you were talking about, the mating habits of ducks or something, you'd still be quite a competent public speaker, is what
Well,
I'm
it depends what day of the week that you get me, Carl. I do have my selection of other language, which I won't bore you with.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us as we kind of come to an end and wrap it up? Would you believe an hour has just flown by?
It's crazy. Just for parents that are going through parental alienation or abduction, just to never lose hope. Never, ever lose hope. And if you're having a bad day, this is what kind of helped me as well. If you're having a really, really horrible day, just do what you have to do. Like, it's if it means staying in your pajamas, stay in your pajamas, because obviously there's some days that you have to that you just you can't find the will to actually, do the basics. And another thing that has helped me as well, if you're having a day where you're just getting annoyed by authorities and being just met with continued closed doors, try not to take it too personally, and always still try and be kind, because there is always going to be a day that kindness will come back to you. Always. I believe in that.
You reminded me of the days when I used to knock on doors for a living. I covered the whole of the northwest of England, knocking on doors, and I also worked as a rep in Clare and Limerick. And we used to say, every no brings you closer to a yes. And for every door that closes,
Yes.
there's
Oh,
another
I've
one that
had plenty of
opens.
closed doors the last 2 years. And just sometimes just following your heart and your gut instinct. Like, as in, if I had followed the advice that I received, I would be trapped in a foreign land, probably without my children. So follow your own instinct. Your own instinct will guide you. Nobody else's advice or nobody else's help. Yes, you can listen, but ultimately it's trusting your own, learning, and obviously going through narcissistic abuse. it takes a long time to start trusting your own instinct and gut. But
Well,
it does happen.
like all of the clients of mine for the right coach, it takes a huge amount of courage to take a look at yourself and then decide, I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to tell the journey of my story. You've obviously been through a terrible time and an ordeal with what's happened to you and what you're still going through. But fair fucking play to you for having the cojones to stand up and say, I'm not going away. I'm not going away. I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to tell my story. I can't wait for your book. I can't wait for more of your public appearances. You'll be chasing down the likes of News Talk and RTE. You're already, you know,
As I said,
a
Carl, this is
considerable
just
profile. Yeah.
it's for my children, and it's for some parent that might have to go through this in the future, that they have resources to lean on, because as we both agreed on, awareness is key, and it's only through increased awareness that the authorities will start to listen, and they need to listen more. They need to listen to parents that are in my situation, and they need to listen to parents that are in your situation, and lots more needs to be done.
So we'll put into the notes in the comments section when we put this out on YouTube, we'll put a link to a brilliant Teal Swan podcast I listened to, and a link to a brilliant blog by Charlie McCready for
Brilliant.
anyone that's going through parental alienation and wants some advice.
Yes.
They can reach out to myself, they can reach out to yourself, they can reach out to Charlie. There are some very useful resources and sort of quick, small wins, things that you can put into practice to help go through, because at the beginning, it can certainly be very disorientating and
Isolating
alarming
and
and
lonely.
shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, very isolating and very lonely. But as we both agreed, it just does take courage to be able to fight the system and to be able to keep saying, no, I'm going to fight and fight for my children.
Yeah. From what I can gather, parental alienation is recognized as a criminal offense in Scotland, Mexico, and recently
Romania.
Japan.
I think in Romania now as well.
Right. Yeah. So there seems to be more. Like I'm not suggesting that there needs to be people getting locked up, but the fact that there's more awareness out there, and the fact that there's more people being made aware that this is happening, surely you would think that
It'd be a deterrent.
well, it's a pretty horrible thing to do to your children and to your ex-partner. And obviously those people are experiencing their own trauma and childhood wounding and mental health difficulties. But the answer's not always very straightforward. Another thing that Charlie got me to see is that a lot of the practices that you can put into play are actually counterintuitive and not what you would think. And sometimes even stepping away or stepping back can be the best thing to do, even though your intuition is telling you no. I'm gonna keep trying to be involved. So every case is different.
Every case
Yeah.
is very different, very different.
I was shocked when I met a mother of 5 in Tipperary. Obviously she'll remain anonymous, but when she explained that she'd been alienated from all 5 of her boys, and I realized this had nothing to do with gender. It was both mothers and fathers
Yes,
that were
it's mothers
the
and fathers
victims.
that experience this. Yes, it's horrific.
It is a very hostile form of psychological abuse, and hopefully the more awareness that we can bring to this and around this, the easier it'll be to identify it and for people to deal with,
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It selects no, it doesn't select a particular gender, unfortunately. It's just and I think maybe with fathers that they have a rougher time, because people have this thing that, oh, men, they'll be able to cope and they'll get on with it. No, they don't. Fathers can be incredibly heartbroken about their children just as much as a mother. So yeah, there's that stereotype that we have to overcome as well.
So all that remains for me to do is to thank you for giving up
Thanks,
your
Carl, for your
time,
time.
for being a guest on the
You.
May edition of the Menscape podcast. Wishing you positive vibrations and well wishes and a successful resolution of your case, and your boys back on Irish soil at some point and in your arms, and your story out there and your book done, and
Live happily ever after.
the visualization and realization of those dreams.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish your listeners hope and healing in whatever they have to go through in their journey as well.
So we'll leave it there for now. Take care,
Thanks a million.
Mandy. Cheers,
Thank you.
and God bless you.